Recording in progress.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being patient. We're happy to get today's webinar up and running. I'm just going to go over a couple of housekeeping items, and then we'll be off to the races with today's presentation. The webinar that you have just joined is Optimizing the New Donor Experience. We're going to be sharing some amazing stories from our friends at NAMI, the National Alliance of Mental Health, and you'll get to know some of those folks here in a minute. Today's webinar is being recorded. You will be able to review this recording within about 24 hours. It'll be coming to your inbox. You can interact with us today a couple of ways. You can use the Q&A option at the bottom of your Zoom panel to ask any questions that you may have. We also have the chat enabled if there is anything there that if you've got any interesting tidbits or thoughts to share there. So you can interact with us that way. A little bit about Allegiance Group and Pursuant. We are a multifaceted agency serving nonprofits across different sectors within the nonprofit space with a variety of services and technology. And then you can see some of those verticals here. My name is Leah Davenport-Fadling, and I'm our Director of Content Marketing. And with that, I'm going to hand things off to our first presenter, David Sacchetti.
Hi, everybody. My name is David Sacchetti. I'm an Associate Vice President for Client Strategy here with the AVP Group. And I'm excited to be with you guys today to talk about our partnership with the National Alliance on Mental Illness. And I'm going to have my colleagues introduce themselves, and then we're going to jump in to the presentation. So Tony, I'll pass it to you.
Hi, I'm Tony. I'm the manager of Direct Response Fundraising at NAMI. So I work with all the mass communications and digital mail, email, and I work heavily with the Marcom team. And I have the privilege of working with Summer and David and a lot of the Pursuant team.
And Summer. Oh, you're on mute, Summer.
Thank you. How long have we been meeting over the web? So sorry. Yeah, I'm Summer Parrish. I'm the National Director of Individual Giving and Development here at NAMI. I'm really excited to be here and get a chance to answer questions and talk to everybody about the work we've been doing with Pursuant, the AVP group. And so, yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks so much.
Okay, so if we go to the next slide, we're going to do just a quick little, Summer's going to give us an overview of NAMI so you guys can understand a little bit more about the organization and their great mission and the work that they are doing to make a difference in people's lives every day. And then Summer and Tony are going to talk a little bit about their journey over the last several years and what led them to engage the Allegiance Group and Pursuant to help them with a shrinking donor file and shifting a lot of strategies for acquisition of new donors and focusing on retention. And then we're going to go through some real tangible examples that we'll share with you for what we've done to implement some changes to the direct response program over the last 8 months. And then we'll have some key takeaways for you guys, and then there'll be some time for Q&A at the end of the session. So moving into the overview for NAMI, I'm going to turn it back over to Summer.
Great. Thanks so much, David. Yeah, so NAMI it stands for National Alliance on Mental Illness, and we are the nation's largest grassroots mental health organization. We started as a small group of parents around a kitchen table trying to advocate for their children back in 1979. And we have grown into the nation's leading voice, the largest group on mental health. So today we are an alliance of more than 650 local affiliates in 49 states. To what I say, the four legs of our stool, we raise awareness, we build advocacy, and we educate and support. We do that through a whole host of programs, but primarily through our peer-to-peer programs, our support groups, our helpline. And it is truly such a privilege to be able to serve in this capacity and to work in this community. So just a little bit about who we are and how we serve across the country. So thanks.
Great. Now, I think, Summer, you were going to talk a little bit about sort of where NAMI was and the journey of the organization over the last sort of 5 years in particular, and how things have evolved for the organization and why you came to AGP for partnership.
Yeah, absolutely. So before 2020, before the pandemic, NAMI was an organization that was really, if everybody remembers, during the pandemic, everybody started talking about mental health, their own mental health, the mental health of other people. So prior to that, though, mental health was still a taboo subject. People weren't discussing it. They didn't want to talk about a loved one who had a mental health condition. But there was mental health was really highlighted during and because of the COVID-19 pandemic. So pre-2020, you can see here the need for mental health resources it definitely existed. They've always existed. That's why we were started in 1979. But it was that cultural awareness, that stigma, and the urgency was pretty limited. And then COVID happened and people were isolated and very much aware of their own need for mental health care, even if it wasn't a serious mental illness. So during COVID and since COVID, the demand for services, I think our helpline services increased 4 times. The number of donors increased, the number of donations, the amount of money we raised, it really surged like we had never seen before. And I know that's not an anomaly. There were a lot of organizations that really saw an increase in funding during that time. But the awareness for mental health and mental health services really did skyrocket during that time. So that was kind of our before and after. So, yeah. And then because of that growth, we went from an $11 million organization to a more than $30 million organization in just 5 years. So as you might imagine, that really stressed our processes and our fundraising needs. It brought a lot of attention, but it also brought a lot of temporary donors. We were attracting a lot of people because of our mission and the messaging, but they weren't necessarily staying around. And so, again, I think a lot of organizations can probably can understand that because if they did see a surge in donations during that time, so the people were very attuned to the things that mattered to them and that appealed to them during that time. But sustaining communication with those donors, again, because our processes did not keep up with the number of donors and donations. We really have had to revise those, but people weren't sticking around. So the result was that we had this shrinking donor file, even though we had all these new donors, because they weren't staying. So we needed to figure out a new way to maintain and retain and communicate with these new donors. So it's a big challenge. So yeah, it's a really cool opportunity for us. I think our traditional donor are those people who've been around with us for a long time. They tend to be, we'll call it middle-aged, not older. Thank you. But in the 55 and plus community, but they've supported us for a long time. I like to say that they finally feel heard and validated because more people have joined this movement in mental health, but they do prefer direct mail. They might see their giving as a duty to their loved one or for another reason versus our new donors who have come to accept mental health as health, right? NAMI has really worked to destigmatize mental illness and mental health conditions. And some of our donors have grown up in and around messaging like that. And so we are really happy to bring them into this, bring them into the fold. But it's also just an emerging donor in a new environment, right? Younger donors tend to see their giving as a piece of their activism, a piece of who they are as for their authenticity. It aligns with who they are as a person, so it aligns with their values. And so we needed to figure out how we can still communicate with our traditional donor, the one who has been with us since the very beginning when NAMI was founded, but also engage with our newer donors in the way that they want to be met with. We often say that we meet people where they are in their mental health journey, and we also want to meet our donors where they are in their donor journeys.
So thank you, Summer. That was really great overview of NAMI and where you guys have been and what your journey has been over the last several years. And I think that's really important context for us for the rest of our discussion because it really helped to understand a lot of those nuances so that when NAMI came to us and told us why they wanted to work with us, it was important for us to have a good understanding of where the organization was, how it evolved, and what they have been facing over the last several years, and helped us to really hone in on some very specific strategies that we're going to show you today for how we could help to turn around that shrinking donor file, not only from an acquisition perspective, but from a retention perspective as well, because those two things go really hand in hand. Yes, we can move forward. I think one of the things, even before we jump in to the specific strategies, is having an exceptional, strong, and robust foundational partnership. So that is, I think, key to the systemic changes that NAMI had articulated that they were interested in. And, in order to achieve that, we're going to have to really do some things differently. And in order to do things differently, that means sometimes, we might try things and they might not work as well. And then we learn from that and then we modulate and shift. And so that really requires a really strong working partnership between the organization and the agency. And so, you know, when we thought about this and putting together this content, these were some of the factors that we thought about for our relationship that we have with NAMI that are really contributing factors to the success of the partnership and what we've been able to accomplish. I think, you know, having that mutual trust and sort of what we call, you know, radical candor allows for us to be able to share things with each other, bounce ideas off of each other, really roll up our sleeves and kind of take a very collaborative approach to what we are doing to manage the program and implement all of these changes. And then I'm going to let Tony jump in here and talk a little bit about the next couple of points here, which I think are really critical to the success of a partnership that is engaging in so much change.
David. I think 2 and 3 kind of go along together here. A big part that has been helpful for our success and our campaigns and everything is being able to work between departments, right? So that involves constantly making sure we're like supporting each other with our different expertise, right, in the different projects. But I think it also has a lot to do with transparency and being like forward with information, right? So that means when you're starting projects, right, you bring people in early, and then you can see who can support and who can help, and maybe who doesn't need to be there and whatever. And then also just being transparent with information and making sure everybody's included, right? So that can really help increase some efficiency and decrease a lot of the repeat efforts, I think, which is really helpful. One of the examples I can think of is like for a lot of our work, we do a lot of story. We like to share a lot of stories, right? And sometimes we find that I'm looking for stories, and then our grant writers are looking for stories, and marketing and advocacy, right? So we, by like sharing what stories we have and what stories we're looking for, right, we're able to reduce like the repeat work, and we're able to collaborate more and share more, which just makes everyone's work easier, right?
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
And then for number 4 and number 5, I think I mentioned this at the outset of talking about these, but that willingness to innovate and test and learn and sort of fail forward, I think is so critical to be able to affect this kind of change. And then for us at AGP, everything we do is driven by data. And so having that data-driven kind of mindset, paired with the willingness to, see results, look at results, analyze them, and really use that data to help inform all of our decisions is critical to be able to implement some of these big changes to the program. And then for the last one, I'm going to let Summer speak a little bit to this sort of leadership, involvement, and alignment.
Yeah, I think this was something that is really helpful and was a big deal to me. I luckily here work with a C-suite that's very supportive and understands what we need in order to be successful in the long run. So I know not everyone, and I've been places where you really have to make a case for the investment in this type of work, right? Especially when it comes to acquisition that is not an immediate return on investment and can be expensive. However, in talking with our Chief Financial Officer and our CEO, they both understand that this is for the long-term health of our donor program and for donations. And so that's really key for the buy-in, and was really critical for also for this culture of innovation, right? They understand that we are going to test things, we are going to try new things. Not everything's going to be perfect, but those two things are aligned and make my job and Tony's job and even our Chief Development Officer's job so much easier, because everybody agrees that this is an investment now and into the future of the organization. So
Great. Thank you, Summer. So now let's jump into the sort of strategies and what we implemented for NAMI over the last several years. So, excuse me, your last several months. So one of the first things that we did was look at the program more holistically. So rather than looking at the acquisition program in a silo and thinking about the performance of the acquisition program on it as its own sort of channel or element, is looking at it within the full program in terms of how appeals were performing on the renewal side. What does the retention rate look like across the board, not just for the retention of new donors that were coming into the organization, but then how were we retaining donors and reactivating donors throughout the entire program. And so one of the things that we identified pretty quickly is that the acquisition program was being run from the perspective of trying to break even as quickly as possible. So that means that it had, a very high average gift and a really low response rate. And we were going after really, high value donors, which is not a bad thing, but was not the right solution for where NAMI was at in their journey and with the growth of services and in trying to pivot the program to ensure that the file was growing. We needed to bring more donors in the door. And so we had to think about revamping acquisition in order to really pull forward a strategy that was going to boost response rate, sacrifice average gift a little bit, and push out that long-term, that time to value for break even for the donor, which, coupled with the changes on the renewal side of the program, and boosting retention would hopefully lead to an increase in the overall value of the program, getting the file growing again, and then seeing that recoup an investment for acquisition to really drive the program to the next level. So, looking at the list strategy, updating the gift array and the acquisition strategy to kind of lower the amount of the ask, revamping the creative, which, is something that we'll take a look at in a minute. And then really elevating that donor experience with more community-driven engagement and stewardship. One of the other things that was really lacking throughout the program was a sense of stewardship, was more of a personal touch to engage donors, both through the mail and through digital efforts and through things like video and text message and voice broadcast. So we wanted to infuse these touch points in the program to really help bond the donors to the organization, whether they were new donors or donors that have been giving for a long time, trying to go after lapsed donors and getting them to reactivate, all with the goal of trying to grow that sort of active donor file size. And getting people to really build and strengthen their connection to NAMI and to the mission, and hopefully leading to subsequent giving. Summer, Tony, anything you would add there before we jump in kind of on some of the specific packages? Great. Okay, so let's take a look. So this is an example of one of the re-envisioned acquisition packages that we partnered with NAMI to update for strengthening the acquisition program from a response perspective. So a couple of things that I will call out here, and Tony mentioned this a little bit earlier as well, is content. So you'll see that there's a story included here, which has a picture of someone who received services from NAMI, and the letter is very personal and tells this journey of this person and how they came to NAMI for assistance. So really putting a face to the organization and putting a real personal touch, including things like, adding some font at the top, which is handwritten, taking the outer envelope and changing it from sort of a standard white, one color envelope to something that is more colorful, that stands out in the mail. We also took the original package, did have some address labels in them, but they were more of like a one sheet, very simple, not overly designed, sort of awareness type of labels. And we re-envisioned those. We brought a lot of color and seasonality into them, adding foil, and things that we knew that were going to help to increase response. And so, this was one of the first packages that we did. And then if you go to the next slide, you can see another example or another iteration of this package that we had done later in the year. Again, featuring a different story of someone who, connected with NAMI and received some services, and, including sort of, again, color and updates, for that time of year. We actually tested an outer envelope as well with the plain brown craft envelope to see how that did, and that actually performed really well. So that was a good example of us testing and refining as we were going through this process. And so, Summer, Tony, before we move on, anything else you would add about the acquisition packages?
Yeah, just a couple things. I think I mentioned about stigma. right? And so having these voices and people who, Tony's worked really hard to make sure that we have people's stories across all types of voices, right? And we want to make sure that breaking down this stigma, that people are willing to share their personal story, their lived experience, because that's what NAMI is all about, is lived experience and sharing that lived experience with people. And so for those who, I challenge folks who are listening or on this webinar to think about what makes their organization and the people who are being served by their organization unique, right? And for us, breaking down stigma is very powerful in what NAMI wants to do. And to that point, what we aren't showing on the back of the labels is our helpline information. We have some statistics and helpline information, so we're also using these labels as a way to get information and resources out to people. And we loved that idea. And I think that was kind of a brainstorm that we had. And that goes back to this partnership of hey, how can we get more information out to people, especially during the holidays, because we know that tends to be a really hard time for people and their mental health. And so on the back of, I think it was this particular labels, and we may end up, I think we've done it ever since then, we have our helpline information and some mental health statistics. So
Yeah, great point, Summer. Thank you for calling that out. And the other thing that I would say about this kind of dovetails a little bit with what Summer was saying around breaking down stigma and having people, sort of talk and tell their stories, is just in general, the sense that this looks less corporate. It looks less cold. It's warmer. It's leveraging a lot of color, a lot of imagery. It's kind of right out the gate creating a sense of personality and look and feel kind of for the organization that we then kept through to the renewal side with a lot of the stewardship examples that you're going to see next. So let's move forward, and we can look at a couple of those touches that we did for these new donors that came on to the file. So this one is really fun. This one is our new donor welcome package. This is something that did not exist before. So it's something that we included in our partnership for 2025. And are literally just launching this now. And it's a welcome package. So, once somebody responds to an acquisition piece, one of the first things that they get will be this welcome package. And what's unique about this welcome package for NAMI specifically is that they have a wonderful partnership with Happy Coffee, which I encourage you all to go out and try. It's absolutely delicious coffee, and proceeds from the sale of this coffee go to NAMI to support the mission. And so we thought, what a novel way to engage new donors by giving them a couple of these packets of coffee in their welcome packet, and encourage them to, brew a cup of coffee, sit down, and learn more about NAMI. And so, the letter is from Summer is infused with stewardship and thanking them for their support and for, welcoming them to the NAMI family. And then there's also a short survey that we are including that is asking them about, you know, what they're interested in, why did they give to NAMI, what other information would they like to see. And then the cool part about the kind of coffee packets is that it's sort of a keep one, give one to a friend. So there's a viral aspect to this. So, you know, a donor can kind of fold this thing in half and rip it apart and then give the other coffee packet to a friend or a family member and say, you know, check out this really cool thing that I got from NAMI. So we're really excited about this, and we think that this is an integral part of that journey for the new donor to go from, you know, coming on board, responding to one of those acquisition packages, and then this is a nice bridge instead of just dumping them into the renewal mailings and the renewal stream and kind of asking for money, you know, right away. There's no ask here. There's no reply card with an ask. It's a purely stewardship touch. Tony or Summer, anything you would add for this one?
I think you touched on it a little bit. I think one of the big things about this is it helps start the relationship off less of a transaction, right? A lot of times donations can just feel like you're giving money. But here, like David said, we're not asking for more money right away. We're starting with a thank you, and we're actually giving them something, right? So they're not just losing money, right? They're getting something immediately. They're also the gratitude and helping them feel a part of the community from the start. And then the things that we are asking are to share, like the coffee packet, right? So then you're building our audience, and then also it kind of helps a person feel like, oh, I'm like thinking of this person and whatever. And then also the survey has an element of sharing your story, right? Like Summer was talking about earlier, our big thing is sharing your story. So sharing your experience with mental health, why you feel connected to NAMI. And then on our side, getting that information helps us to lead our stewardship in the future, right? So we know if you're interested in education, then we'll send you more information about our support groups and our trainings and programs. But if you're more interested in advocacy, we'll share kind of the stuff we're doing on the Hill and everything. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. That's excellent. So then on the next slide, we have another example of a stewardship touch that we did from a digital perspective. And this was one of the things that we did early on in our partnership to begin to infuse stewardship into the program. And we reached out to the entire community. So this wasn't just new donors, this was everyone, and asking them to participate in the Summer of Self-Care photo album. So we sent several emails out, and we asked people to share a photo from their favorite summer self-care activity. And they could go to a landing page and upload their photo, include their information, and then it would be included on a photo album aggregator on a landing page where you could go and see all of these great photos from the NAMI community that are really celebrating summer and sharing, you know, what they do to kind of de-stress and enjoy summer. And so the great aspect to this is that it is stewardship, but it's also engagement. So, you know, there was a kind of stewardship thankful message to it, but this was really about fostering a sense of community for the NAMI organization and for those that support NAMI, and giving people an opportunity to participate in something, feel like they're part of a community, and get to know the other people that are within their community through sharing these images. And this did really well. We got hundreds and hundreds of submissions from NAMI donors and non-donors, and just people who were thrilled to be able to participate in this. And we're planning several other iterations of this for 2025 throughout the coming months. For May's Mental Health Awareness Month, we're doing sort of a message wall and a post-it note that asks people to share their why around why mental health is important to them. So this is just a great example of an opportunity to foster that sense of community and really get people to engage other than through giving and through a fundraising ask. Summer, Tony, anything you'd add about that? Good. Awesome. So the next a couple of examples are, here's some more of the different digital assets for that Summer of Self-Care program with different images that were used on the website and on the homepage and on social media. So the next slide shows a digital stewardship touch and a print card focused on the new year. So again, an opportunity to engage and connect with the donor base that offers thanks, but that also engages them in taking a survey. So this one, again, different from the new donor welcome packet. This was a digital touch and then a stewardship card that went in the mail, wishing the whole donor file sort of a happy new year. And starting off the year right with a new year message, and then asking people to take a survey so that we can learn more about what they are interested in. And so this was a great way of taking some of the things that we were after from the new donor package and collecting that information from the existing donors, the people who have been giving to NAMI over months and years, to collect more of that information. Summer, Tony, anything you would say about that one? Okay.
Each year, 1 in 5 U.S. adults experience mental illness.
Hi,
17% of youth ages 6 to 17 experience a mental health disorder.
I joined NAMI because I have two sons that live with a mental illness, and I didn't want any other
Thank you, Leah, for going off of that for a second. We weren't sure how that was going to work. But the main takeaway from that slide is that in addition to mail and email, we also are employing other tactics to foster that sense of community and sharing that sense of thanks. So we leveraged voice broadcast a couple of times to wish people a happy Thanksgiving, to share a happy New Year, thanking them for their support and that they're a valued member of the NAMI community. We also are doing video, not polished or professional video, but really homegrown video, sharing thanks from Summer or Jessica, the CDO at NAMI, just putting more of a human face to the organization and allowing people to see that human sort of connection in the organization, and why it's so important that they donate to the mission, and really giving them a nice help strengthen their connection to the organization. Summer and Tony, anything you would add?
I think the only thing other thing I would add is that by in this part, when we started this partnership, prior to starting this partnership, donors and potential new donors heard mostly from our CEO. So this is giving an opportunity for people to get to know, to hear from not only our CEO, but our Chief Development Officer, from me, from Tony. So different people within the organization and our fundraising team are reaching out to people in various ways, as well as our Chief Advocacy Officer, or our people who are sharing their personal stories. So we've just widened who is signing letters, or now sending texts or voicemails, or all the various ways we're doing this. And so they just get to know more people at NAMI. And that, I think, is a really great thing too.
Yeah, great. That's a great point, Summer.
I guess I would add that the nice thing about this, like, I guess logistically, is that it's a lot less costly to try, right? Like, a lot of the mail stuff is like very involved, needs like a lot of lead time, and just like postage and materials and stuff alone can be very costly, right? But some of this stuff can be done very cost effectively, right? So like the videos, like Jessica's video, we just asked her to hold her phone up, record a very casual video, and then we send it out to our donors, like through MailChimp or whatever. And we can do it through Outlook, and you don't need as much, like that can even be done like at the last minute and it still works, right? Yeah, and then you can reach also a bigger audience, right?
Yeah, that's a great point, Tony. Thank you. So initial results, this is definitely ongoing, and we are playing a long game here over the next 12 to 18 months, but we are seeing those real results connected to the acquisition efforts and some of the stewardship touches. So the response rate for the acquisition packages increased from like in the 0.4 range to 0.76. And as we move into 2025, with some of the other strategies that we're planning for acquisition mailings throughout the year, we hope to grow that to over 1% this year. That translates to, going from about 900 new donors per mailing to about 1,600 new donors per mailing. And so, getting that influx working on the acquisition side, getting those numbers up, getting more people in the door, and then taking them through that journey, I think is going to be critical to that long-term impact. We also saw the average gift drop from about $52 to $34, which we had expected that to happen. It may go down into the 20s, throughout this year, and that's okay. It's just going to take longer to recoup that acquisition investment, but we will have a growing donor file, and we'll have a larger pool of people to turn into multi gift donors and multi-year donors. And that's really what is going to drive that long-term increase in revenue and impact for the organization. So, we're seeing some of the immediate results from some of the stewardship touches, with the great response that we got from the Summer of Self-Care photo album and some of the other touches. We're seeing interaction there, and then measuring that retention is going to be something that we do over the long term. It's 6-month and 12-month increments. So, taking a look at that a little bit later this year, seeing what the retention rates look like compared to what they were in the fall of 2024, to really get a sense for, how all of these stewardship and engagement touches are working to keep donors retained, engaged, and growing their relationship with NAMI. Okay, and then these are some just key takeaways for you guys. I think we've talked about this quite a bit, I think, earlier in the presentation, but really, as Summer mentioned, engaging leadership and getting that cross-departmental collaboration and breaking down silos, getting that shared ownership across the organization, engaging in, really building trust and a strong relationship between the agency and the organization, leading with data, using it to help engage stakeholders at NAMI, having it, really drive our decision making around what we're doing, and then really kind of preparing for the future. There's a lot of uncertainty out there right now in the world, specifically, and with everything going on with the economy and policies and things like that. We don't know what's coming around the corner in terms of an economic downturn, upturn, so just really preparing for the future and ensuring that you've got all of the aspects of your program working as best as they can to weather the storm that could happen, that could be coming around the corner. Okay. Leah, I think you're going to take over from here.
Yeah, thank you. So we've had a lot of great questions come up in the chat, in the Q&A panel that I would love to get to. I'm just going to share a couple of resources as we're getting ready to answer some of your questions. So one resource that may be of interest to you is Embracing Relationship Fundraising. This really ties together a lot of the thinking behind the strategies that we shared today and of how to kind of deepen retention amongst your donors by making them feel more connected to your organization. And then if you would like to learn a little bit more about the National Alliance on Mental Illness, you can scan this QR code or go to their website to learn more about that organization. And I apologize, Summer, to you for butchering the name at the beginning of our webinar. I was juggling a lot of things as we were getting off to the races, so appreciate your forgiveness there. Oops, I would love to. Well, there goes my slides, but let's just go ahead and get to your questions. So one question came in from Jeanette, which was, why would you reduce an initial ask amount? This question confused a few folks.
I can take that. So the The reason why we reduced the ask amount in our acquisition packages is because we wanted to increase the number of new donors. We wanted to increase the response rate. So by lowering the ask in acquisition, we lowered the threshold or the barrier for people to participate. So someone could, come in as a $25 donor as opposed to a $50 donor. And the goal for doing that is so that we could boost the number of new donors that were coming into the organization.
Great. I think we've got time for one more, and I'm looking for a good one that we can answer quickly. One person asked, my organization is already working under severe budget constraints, and we've had to cut back on direct mail. Which of these meaningful changes do you suggest for direct mail that won't add extra costs?
Yeah, I think Tony hit the nail on the head earlier with some of the alternative kind of touch points. Leveraging video, is a really cost-effective way to get some messages out there to your donors. So, leveraging things like text message and voice broadcast and leveraging video that you can share helps to are very cost-effective ways of doing things. If you're really direct mail heavy, you could look to digital a little bit more, see if you can leverage a little bit more on email if you've had to cut back on direct mail. But I think, those low cost, high touch, high impact videos, not just for thanks, but you can use them for fundraising asks as well. How it could change an email with a fundraising ask if you include a short homegrown video from your CEO or your chief development officer saying why it's important to give right now. It can go a long way to getting people to respond.
I think something else that's nice to keep in mind is that it doesn't need to be fancy, right? Like I think sure we do things through MailChimp and there's like a lot of design and everything. But we also do a lot of things that are like just text signed by Tony. Or like the video is like very clearly not like a polished high production. It's just Jessica's cell phone, right? I think we found a lot of like responses that way as well. So it doesn't have to be like a whole a whole big thing, right? It could be an email that just looks like text, really, that you mass send, and just having that feel like a personal touch already does a lot, and it's very cost effective, right?
Yeah, I love that, Tony. A lot of times things that are low tech look more authentic and more personal. So sometimes things feeling a little homegrown can be super effective. Well, I am so flattered and thrilled by all the interaction and questions we've had in today's webinar, but I do want to make sure that we're not holding anybody back from an important meeting or their lunch. So thank you everyone for joining us. We will make sure and follow up with anybody we didn't get to who sent in a specific question via email tomorrow. And as a reminder, you will get this recording and the slides tomorrow, and you should be able to click to get some links to those media files as well. But once again, thank you for giving us an hour of your Thursday, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Summer, David, and Tony, thank you so much for today's presentation.
Thank you guys. Really appreciate it.